we have some very special guests. Scott and Jackie Eberhart have become very dear to Lauren and I and our family, and it's cool how God has brought us together. And I have been waiting for this day. You guys have heard me talk about them. We got to go visit them, and now they get to be here, and you guys get to be ministered to by them and get to meet them. So can we give a huge table welcome to Pastor Scott as he comes up and preaches. Love you, brother. Have fun.
Need my hands free. That's good. It's so good to be here with you guys. It is amazing how God orchestrates interactions and those things that you just never know are going to end up in friendships. We were 2022 down in Orlando, Florida at our Foursquare National Connection, and they highlighted church planters. And they said, any of you guys church planters, will you please stand? And we looked around, and right behind us is this young couple. And Zachy and I, my wife Jackie and I, we prayed for them. We laid hands on them. We prayed for them. And we're like, oh, this is so cool. They're so brave. You know, they're going to Idaho. They're doing a church plant called The Table. They already knew what they were going to call it. And then we just kind of forgot about it. And then a year later, in 2023, a year later, we were in Anaheim at the next National Foursquare Connection, and we got invited out by Mike Mercer of Compassion First. I think you guys may have heard of him. Anyways, we go to lunch, and we're talking, and this guy starts sharing about, they're doing a church plant, The Table, and Jackie and I looked at you, we prayed for you last year. You don't lock people in your mind and say, this is weird, you know, and this time we got to meet their kids, Esther, Malachi, and Ellie. And it was like, oh, this is such a cool family. That is so cool. Hey, go for it, you guys. Church planters. It's like, I have nothing but respect for you. And then fast forward a year later, 2024, at our Northwest District Conference, and one of the breakout sessions was about church planters. And God had been talking to my heart about, you really need to be invested in, find out who's doing church planting. Our church is a small church, and we have a passion for our community, but I went, and lo and behold, there is Pastor James and Lauren doing their presentation. One of the team, I'm like, I recognize these guys. You'd think you'd memorize people. I've only seen them 3 times, and I'm thinking, hey, look, the red hair gives it away. And the no hair, never mind, gives it away. You can remember people. And it was like, God's doing something. And out of that conversation, just realizing that how many of you know that God, when he wants you to pay attention, he repeats things? And I was like, I need to pay attention to this. And out of that conversation, we started talking. I said, I know this is weird. I says, but they talked about supporting church plants. I said, what do you think about us connecting over the phone? And out of that conversation, we began to have a meeting time every week on Tuesdays. And then we would say, hey, I would love our church to meet you guys. And we arranged for them to come out to Lebanon, Oregon, where I pastor a Foursquare church, my wife Jackie, and we welcomed them and their family into our home. And it was just a joy to get to know them. As it's been a few years since Jackie and I have had teenagers and younger in our home, and it was just fun to play because I love playing. It was just a lot of fun, and to see God open those doors of relationship, and then here I am now, to meet you guys, and so. We get to pray for each other. We get to encourage each other. And it's just such a joy for that process to happen. A little bit about just my wife and I. I'm of retirement age, which I'm trying to remember where we were this week, where we got to go to McCall this last week. Beautiful. And the senior discount starts at 70. And do not qualify for the senior discount. It used to be like 50, and then 55, and then 60 and 65. Well, McCall, apparently they got a really healthy population, and they're losing money. And so they raised the bar. It's like, okay, 70. And so we have been married. 2 reasons why this day is amazing. One is we get to meet you guys. The number 2 reason this day is amazing is today, actually, April 27th, is my wife and I's 40th wedding anniversary. That's it. And we all know us guys know who that clap goes for. It's like anybody who can put out and see potential in somebody, to stick it out. And there's been hard times. If you've been married, whether it's a year or 10 years or 20 years or maybe longer than us, it's hard work. It's a process that we go through. And think about all those things that we face as we celebrate this special day. I just think about what is it that things that I've learned. And I think about probably two realities that are the most profound for me in where I am today in my relationship with my wife and even my kids and my friends. The first reality is being able to say the statement, I was wrong. I was wrong. That's like a totally humbling thing. And you guys have trouble saying that? In fact, I think you should practice that right now. I was wrong. I remember even saying that words. I couldn't even get it out, right? I was wrong. It is humbling. And as you get to know each other, you love when your friends have to admit that, right? And you're like, I'm sorry I didn't hear you, right? To say it again, because that process, that humbling things, experiences that happen, that you think that your way is the only way, and it's not. You think your way is the best way, and it's not. Then you come to the point where you realize it's like, not only is my way not the best way, but it is a terrible way. That it was so significant. I look back and talk about that relationship and recognizing what my priorities should be. To be able to ask, Jackie, what do you think about this idea? I think this is an amazing idea, and it's from God, but what do you think about it? To be able to be open up and I think we have a tendency in our walk with the Lord as we make our plans and then we ask God to come approve it, right? Say, God, would you bless this decision? Instead of stepping back and say, God, what do you want me to do? What is a good decision? I think the second reality is equally, and maybe not so surprising, with that first reality of I was wrong, but you were right. Not only you were right, you are a gift to me. I just think about the process early on, and maybe you can relate, and even currently, our budget was really tight. It was really tight. And my wife and I chose for her to be at-home mom. In fact, I personally was not on board with that. Both of us graduated college, and my wife was finished up her master's degree in our first few months of marriage, and I personally was looking forward to double income. I was looking forward to the comfortable life, to buying lots of toys, to enjoying life and traveling, and then we got pregnant. And my wife said, well, of course we're going to stay home. And I was like, what? She goes, why would I give my parenting to somebody else? And that's not it. We're all wired differently. There is no wrong way to love Jesus. But it was just like, wow, I never thought about that way. And I had to get on board. But with that was finances were tight. And I remember telling her, it's like, show me the receipt. I said, bill is way too high. And she would show me the receipt, and she goes, tell me what I shouldn't have bought. And I looked at the receipt, and I'm like, nothing. And then she would ask me, and I would have the right way to do things. She would say, tell me what you do differently. And I would say, nothing. What you did was the right thing to do, was the best thing to do. And I think in that gift of recognizing that not only was she right, but she was a gift to me. An amazing gift that I had my list by my undergrad is in accounting. Those spreadsheets make my heart beat fast. That those things that you want to line up, and God answered those, but there was a bunch of qualifications I didn't even think of, that God knew what I needed. And I began to have that joy and recognizing what a gift she was in that process. I can think about this morning. You got to think, oh, this is about a marriage thing. But I'm sorry, it's my 40th anniversary, and I get to talk about my marriage a little bit. But I think about the context of what Pastor James has laid on his heart and the church for stepping into this valley, Treasure Valley, and being a witness in a bigger and more powerful way. That this message may seem like a marriage message, but it's a church message as well. When we talk about, there was recently read Psalms 85:10, love and faithfulness meet together. Righteousness and peace kiss each other. Love and faithfulness meet each other. Righteousness and peace kiss each other. I just think, if you're like me, I had a hard time with Psalms when I was younger. I was like, that is just like way too touchy-feely for me. It was like, that's a lot of poetry, and my poetry is limited to roses are red, violets are blue. That was it. I couldn't even figure out what the rhyme was, and so it was hard for me. But as I went back I read my Bible and try to read through it every year, and I come across those verses that you've underlined, it's like, oh, that is so good. And this is one of those verses in Psalms 85:10 that described it, that intimate relationship between love and faithfulness and righteousness and peace. That you think about just the joy of somebody's company. That you meet somebody, especially as you may be in a dating relationship, and you meet them and you're like, I like this person. Wait, when can we meet again? That relationship that there is no separation between love and faithfulness. That God designed fit for those things to go together. Where you have one, you'll find the other. Wherever you will find love, that not too far behind, later you're going to find faithfulness at that place too. That you meet one. The reality is, you think about love, you cannot have love without faithfulness. And you cannot have faithfulness unless love is present. To be faithful is to be consistent, regardless of opposition. Faithful to show up to work. How many guys love to go to work every day? Right? It's like, I'd like to stay home. You love to... There's times I love to go to work. You know that joke about the pastor who's in bed sleeping, and he says, honey, I don't want to go to work today. He says, honey, you have to. You're the pastor. It's like those hardest things that we do, that you find out that you do regardless because you're faithful to them. It's something that you're called to do, whether it's parenting or whether it's to a job, to be consistent. Faithfulness is not dependent on circumstances. We'll see how it rolls out, whether we continue to do this or not. Faithfulness is not earned. Faithfulness is given. If you truly love somebody, you're going to be faithful to them, faithful to the process, faithful to hope, faithful to want what is best for them, faithful to work, faithful to just show up. I think about those conversations that were so hard earlier in our marriage. We had this thing called the communication card. And it was talked about just being a good listener in that process. And you just would love to check out. Let's just move on from this. I don't want to come back to this. But to show up. And in that place, we see that righteousness and peace kiss each other. At the place that we do things that are good and right, peace follows. If you look at the word of peace in the Hebrew, I'm not a big Hebrew scholar, and I'm not Jewish, but how many know what the word for peace is? Shalom. Are you guys any of the Chosen fans in here? Shalom, shalom. And is that peace that comes is encompassing not just not absence of conflict, but the kind of shalom peace, it invades every single part of your life. Anything and everything that you do, that kind of shalom, that kind of peace, that when you and I walk out God's righteousness, when we do what is right and what is good, it results in peace, in shalom, in every aspect of your life. I just think about, 3 years ago when we sat in front of this young couple in Orlando, Florida, we had no idea where it was going to end up. But we knew it was right. Hey, they're raising their hand. We're going to plant a church. Would you pray for us? And Jackie and I stepped out and said, yeah, we're going to pray for them. We're going to believe. We're going to listen for God's word of encouragement to them, not knowing the peace and the blessing that would come out of that. The encouragement that would come. Righteousness and peace love each other. It's an intimacy. It's kind of weird. How do you have that? The idea of poetry in Psalms is that picture of poetry that gives illustration of relationship. You kiss somebody because there's an intimate relationship. There's an affection there that happens. They're both motivated. There's a result that they're a complement to each other between the two. I just think about what the Apostle Paul wrote in Galatians 6:9. Let us not become weary in doing good, righteousness. For at the proper time we will reap a harvest, peace, if we do not give up. It's a process. It's a faith walk to keep doing the right thing because because God is true to everything, that it's going to result in something good. I talk to young parents and say, you know what I call it? I call it parenting by faith. It's like, how many times do you have to tell your kid to clean up their room? A lot. How many times do you have to keep picking up? How many times do you have to keep saying the same thing? A lot. It's parenting by faith, because I say that's the best thing you can do, is to realize that what you're doing, good, righteousness, has a result. I remember when our firstborn son went to college, and my wife and I got the most precious email from him. And he said, Mom, Dad, he's at a dorm, and he went to George Fox University, which was a Christian university, and in the dorms he said, Mom, Dad, thank you for how you raised me. I'm thinking, and he didn't describe about just different situations, Christian college, but guess what? We all need saved. Even if you go to a Christian college, you still need to get saved to recognize your need for God. And it was so encouraging to us because we parented by faith. We messed up. Okay, I messed up. I was wrong a few times. But to see the fruit of that and to see him raise our grandkids today with his wife, it just is a blessing, because we see, and we're told early on, talk about parenting, that we just grabbed a hold of it to our heart, and it gave us motivation and a perspective. The guy said, my goal is to not raise godly children. My goal is to raise godly grandchildren. I love that because it gave a perspective. I just don't want my kids to behave right. I want them to live right, to know why they do what they do, so that they will raise their kids who love the Lord, who do what is good and right. And it was just a great perspective. And so we'd always have conversations with our kids about, it wasn't just don't do that. It was like, what were you thinking? Which is a classic answer the kids say, I wasn't, right? But let's talk about this. What is it, the friends that you're picking, the choices that you're making? Where is it leading? What does it look like? A few years back, my wife and I went to LED, and we're very impacted by a marriage curriculum called Marriage Oneness. And were three attributes that were very significant, and I want to talk about for a minute. Probably the most significant is really just the catchphrase of Marriage Oneness, is when two me's become a we. when two individual personalities and characters become a we. And I love that, because it's not about us leaving our personalities behind, leaving behind our passions behind, leaving our skills behind, but taking those two individual persons and bringing them together into a we. It was so meaningful to us, because I don't know about you, if you've ever had a boyfriend or girlfriend or are married today, how many of you, the person you are married or dating is exactly like you? Right? It's just, the saying goes what? That opposites attract. And it's so true. If you've met my wife, you're like, I can't believe you guys are super different. I always joke with my kids, it's like, you want a no for an answer? Come ask your dad. You want a yes for an answer? Go ask your mom. And it's just, they knew. Every once in a while they played it off each other. And they would come and I said, what did your mom say? On those tough questions, right, that they're asking. And they would say, she told me to come ask you. And I was like, okay, time for a family meeting. We need to go into the bedroom, shut the door, have the discussion, then come back out with a common front answer. Because they will trick you into the answer they want. And we wanted to be solid on what we said. But I think about just those simple phrases like, we are better together. The most secure, if you look at kids that are most adjusted and achieve, step out in risking life, are the ones where they're in a home with a mom and dad who love and care about them. And we know that that's such a difficulty in this day with new generations that have no desire to get married because they've had terrible examples and don't see the joy in it. And I just think, I want to example a great marriage. I want to example, I just remember even our daughter is my wife and I kiss in the kitchen. The kitchen is the hottest room in the house. And she would, at one point, she would say, oh, you guys. And then she'd come back and say, you know what? My friends love how you guys treat each other because they don't see that in their house. And she began to tone it down. They're like, okay, you guys can kiss and hug. Just don't get mushy, too mushy. But as I think about that becoming a we, and this is the part I'm talking about. It sounds like a marriage message, but I want to go broader than that. It's really about a church message. Because what is it that marriage is likened to? Well, Paul talks about Ephesians. He says, I'm amazed about marriage, but I'm not talking about a marriage between a man and a woman. I'm talking about the marriage of Christ and his bride, the church. What I'm going to talk about this morning, these three aspects of how we become a we, is true for a marriage relationship. But it is as true for a church body. So whichever way that this place lands for you, and maybe it's both, because God is neither an either or. I have found God to be a both and. That this would be something that you'd be challenged with, not only personally and maybe your relationships of the person you want to marry to the person that you are married to. But you'd be challenged as a church body. What is it that God called us to? The first of three arenas that we become a we in is to have a common direction. A common direction for your marriage and for your life. To have a common direction for your church. It is so important what your goals are, what your dreams are. What do you hope for? What do you want spiritually? What do you want physically? What do you want emotionally? What do you want financially? What do you want as a family? What do you want out of your parenting? What do you want your community to look like? What do you want your church to look like? All those things define like which way are we going? Because if you don't come up with a common direction, I guarantee it'll be some serious stress in your life, some serious conflict in life, some serious wasted energy because you'll be like this instead of going in that same direction. Not having a common direction, not having common priorities, not having common choices that you complement each other. I remember is probably the most conversations and arguments my wife and I had were about, you would think it was finances, but it wasn't. Our number one argument was about parenting. We see things so differently. And I remember having the conversation. We said, listen, we are different people. Our kids need both of us. And we both want amazing, well-adjusted, wise, kind kids in our family. We both want that. We just go about it differently and begin to respect our different approaches to things. But realize in the context what the common direction was, we wanted kids who loved Jesus, kids who knew how to work through hard things, kids who knew how to choose great friends, kids who knew how to have a relationship with the Lord. That was so important. It is, you think about that common direction is not a one and done. It changes. Over the last 15 years, my wife and I have been empty nesters. Whoop, whoop. You know, some of your parents prayed for that day. To be empty nesters and watch our kids move out and start their careers. And it was amazing. It was wonderful, but it didn't happen right away. You know, I remember my kids, I have 2 boys. I have a son, a daughter, and a son. And I love to play. And my wife, when they moved out, and college was done, and they moved and got established, she said, I'm not going to be enough for you. You like to play too much. You know, just like your schedules change and there's new priorities. And so we had to define, what is our common direction? What does it look like? You know, because every night wasn't scheduled anymore. We got to binge watch some TV shows that we watch way too much of. But at some point we're like, this is getting really old. You know, at first it feels like, oh, this is so great. Oh, this is awesome. And then you're like, we'd just even love to say, this guy's the bad guy. We'd guess who was going to be right to see who the mystery murderer was or thief was. But that was so important. As Jackie and I shared, we got to spend time up in McCall this last week. And it was our first time there. It was beautiful. And we even tried to go on a hike and discovered that it was still snowed in. And we didn't have any snowshoes. Thank goodness. But we had to talk about, what is our common direction? What is it? What is it, our direction for our faith? What is our direction in our finances? What does our future look like? And it was challenging because this last June, my wife retired from a career in education. And so she's got some time on her hands. What does that look like? And she's pressuring me. It's like, hey, I'm retired now. How come you're still pastoring? And I love this. I love pastoring. But we had it coming together. What is our common direction? What is it that we're going to meet together on? What is it that our goals are going to be? What does church life look like? What does relationship with our kids and our grandkids look like? Our neighbors, our life group, all those things that's so important to come together. As you talk about a church, it's so important. Why are we doing church? Are we just going through the motions, something to do on Sunday afternoon that we don't have anything else to do? Or is it something that there's a bigger goal in mind? The second arena of 3 arenas that were really super meaningful to Jackie and our relationship. The second one is emotional connectedness. And I know, I say the word emotions, guys, shut down. It's just a scary word that you just imagine, just the word emotions, you break out in a cold sweat. Because all of a sudden you imagine that there's these guys, they start crying. They start crying. They start hugging each other. It's like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be emotional. You have an image about what it means to be emotional, and it's not what God intended. Did you know God's emotional? God cries. God gets excited. God gets disappointed. All those things, God gets hopeful. Those things that He created, we are created in God's image, so that means we're created in His image. We're also emotional beings. I describe emotions as kind of like dashboard lights. We live in a fallen world, and our emotions aren't always so great. And so we run away from them. But they're dashboard lights to describe something is going on inside. What happens when you ignore the check engine light? It may go for a little while, but eventually something serious will happen. The oil pressure light. There's some things that we need to pay attention to. I talk about emotions is to be curious. I think is the most wonderful when things happen. It's like, why do I break up in a sweaty mess when this happens? Why do anybody starts to raise their voice, I shut down? What is it behind it? That's the thing that is going on. What is going on inside of me? It's so important to be aware of your emotions, to be emotionally connected with somebody. Ironically, as I share, this last week, we used our anniversary to kind of like a review of our relationship. It seems appropriate, right? To go back and look and say, hey, what's going on with us? And we talked about categories, and I like making notes because I forget, and so I set up a common direction note in my phone. We talked about what is it that we're going to talk about. And so we had some categories, and we talked about our faith, talked about our finances a little bit, talked about our future. It was interesting after having those kind of conversations and hearing what it was from each of our perspectives of what were important issues in those areas, we became emotionally connected. I remember coming home from work and just trying to wrestle through, okay, how do you become emotionally connected? I remember just sharing with my wife, said, this situation at work was super frustrating. This situation, it was just messed up and made me so mad, or this situation went really well. Because I worked in construction for construction companies for a number of years before I went to seminary and then became a pastor. And it was challenging. There was a challenging, was not, their goal was to make money, not to help the world be a better place. It was super stressful. In fact, it changed my personality so much that I said, I really need to get out of here. And so as I even shared those frustrations, my wife, she says, I love you. I was like, I just shared about my day. No, I love you. Just me sharing about my frustrated day allowed my wife and I to be emotionally connected. Things that you think are obvious, just like you ask your kids, how was your day at school? Fine. Is there an emotional connectedness there? No. And then maybe you're skillful at asking this question. So, what was your favorite part of your day? What was the hardest part of your day? What's a part that you hope will never happen again? Or what's something that you hope will really happen again? And then you just listen. Those things that we want to understand. And as I got emotionally connected, my wife, I remember we were in an argument. That hardly ever happens, right? We were in two very mellow, easygoing people that we are. We see life very differently and constantly have different views how things should be, and this was one of those times. And I got out my card. It had a magnet on the fridge. I got it out and said, I am going to listen, because the goal of listening was to convince the other person in your feedback that you really understand what they're saying. Not just repeating what they're saying, but really understanding. And so I was really being intentional. And so she shared something with me, and I put it in my own words, and I said, so you feel like I'm clueless about the struggle of your day, that you feel like the moment that you get a moment to rest, that the kids wake up throwing up, or that you just want some quiet time and there is no quiet time. And then I come home and I'm clueless about what's going on with your day. And she says, yeah. Here's the crazy thing, what she said next to me. That thing that we were arguing about, I said, well, let's find out what should we do. She says, I don't care. Whatever you want to do is fine with me. it just means so much to me that you know how my day went and how hard things are for me. I was like, note to self, pay attention to what she said, because life will go easier. Talk about, as you as a church share your common direction to be emotionally connected. As I thought about this, there was a verse that came to mind that you may think, like, what does this have to do with anything? But I think this is an example from James 5:16 of us being emotionally connected as the church. Therefore, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. To share with your church body, to have the kind of relationship that you share your struggles with. It's like, dude, this is messed up. This is so hard for me. This is something I wish was out of my life, and I don't understand why God just doesn't take it away. There's something going on. And they can say, oh man, that is so hard. I struggle with that too. And to be able to pray with each other, to be emotionally connected, to know, look across the room and see people when they come in and say, hey, I know that guy. I love that guy. I love that guy because they face the same kind of struggles I do, and yet they're faithful. I just think with just showing up at church, I love to look at church because I look out and see each of you, and I know you're not here because your week was amazing. I know you're here because your week was hard. That you're here because you're saying, God, I want to do what you want to do. I want to grow my relationship with you. I want to understand a bigger picture of what's going on with life. Just like me. Just like me. I come to church not because I got all the answer. I come to church because I know the one who does. I come to church to understand, to grow. The third arena shouldn't be a surprise, but it's mutual commitment. Mutual commitment. We are both invested in what's going on. And as we come together as a church, we know the common direction that we're going. We know what we're going to accomplish. And we're in this together. And you know, what do most people say about relationships? Marriage especially? It's 50-50, right? It's not. It's 100-100. If you're not coming in and giving it all you got, that's not dependent on somebody else's 50%, it's not going to work. Because it need to be intentional, to be all in, because it takes to be all in and somebody else is all in to work through our brokenness. Say, God, would you help us grow? I'm not waiting to see what you're going to do before I commit. I'm already committed. I'm committed, dedicated to this activity of becoming a we, to becoming together, to be single in mind, single in purpose. It's called the body of Christ. Working in conjunction, working in symphony, working in a direction that they're going, committed to my well-being of another person, committed to my marriage, committed to my church, committed to loving each other well, committed to my desire to grow, committed to your desire to grow, committed to mature, to not be the same, to becoming more like Christ, to be a changed person, committed to stick it out even when you're a jerk, committed to stick it out even when I'm a jerk. I remember when that final stage before Jackie and I got married, I had come to the turn. I was like, this is getting serious. I was like, and I really like dating girls, go figure. And I was like, I'm not ready to get married. And I remember as we decided, we broke up, and my roommate asked my wife, my girlfriend, my ex-girlfriend out. And wise woman that she was, he said, hey, do you think Scott would mind if we went out? And she said, I don't know, you should ask Scott. And so he asked me, hey, do you mind you guys are broken up, do you mind if I ask her out? If we, go up to Santa Barbara? I'm like, I remember feeling sick inside, thinking like, yeah, I mind, but we broke up. Why should I mind? You know, just working through that and realizing, like, I love this girl. I don't want my roommate to date her. I want to pursue this relationship. I want to be committed to this person. And I remember as thinking about in that process of that relationship, thinking that if I was terrible enough, she would leave me. And I was the jerk. I was a terrible boyfriend. If you knew Jackie, she is the most gentle, loving person. And I remember us getting in a fight, and she was at the house. She was renting with a couple of friends. And I was not good at relationship building and communication. I remember backing out of the driveway and watching her shoe that she took off. The driveway was a long driveway with windows across the side there. She took her shoe off. I watched the shoe go from the laundry room past the kitchen window into the dining room window. And I'm thinking, that's what an idiot it was to make my dear wife that angry that she would take her shoe off and throw it across the house. I was like, wow, you really messed up. Actually, I didn't think that. I just remember thinking she was really mad. Was I that much of an idiot? And it took me a while to hear the Holy Spirit's answer. It's like, yes, you were. But as we worked through that, and she still didn't walk away from me, I knew that she was committed to me, because if I could be that much of a jerk and her stick around, it means that she really loved me. And I say that to all of us, not only in a marriage, but in a church. As you stick around a church, did you know you'll meet some people that don't have it all together? You know, that joke goes that if you're looking for a church that's perfect and you find it, it won't be once you get there. It's a reality. It's like, that's called the body of Christ, that we get to discover who we are and what we're not in relationship. As you come together as a church and become we as the body of Christ, I'm super excited for what God has for this valley. Through the table, the community that gets to come together and love Jesus. Do your relationships reflect love and faithfulness? Does your love and your faithfulness meet together? Because that's what it takes to be a we, not only in a marriage, but in a church. To be encouraging, to be loving, to want somebody's best, to be willing to overlook somebody's immaturity or their bad day. How would you rate your common direction as a church? How would you rate your common direction in those important relationships that you have? Your emotional connectedness. It is a process. I love who I'm becoming. But it didn't happen overnight. I got lots of stories of pain, of, man, I wish I wouldn't have done that. Or why did I say that? To really look down and say, God, you're growing me. You care about me. And sometimes when you do something dumb, it's just silence. Because you got to it's got to hang there as you be able to figure out what in the world is going on inside of me. And just even in that, there's an emotional connectedness, and say, Jackie, I know I'm really kind of cranky, and I think it's because I'm stressed out. And I'm always blessed when my lovely wife says, yeah, I know. It's like, I think I'm hiding my stress well, and my wife knows that there's something going on.